Hello, YouTubers. It is Sunday, January 5th, 2021. Greetings from the High 10, and it is Everyday Shenanigans. I'd like to bring you an update on The Reckoning, which is the second installment of the Surviving R. Kelly series. It is the sequel, and I will be talking about episode 3 and 4. I want to start off with Geronda. She's one of the young girls who had been there in his life as a young girl. She was an underage girl when he met her. This is about 15, 16 years of age. And she stayed with him because he invited her to stay. And she liked him, I guess, at first, one time. But then things started to get harrowing. And she realized that it was not going to get better with Mr. Kelly. And she lived with him for several years. She admitted during this documentary that Robert asked her to sign or to participate in a um, suicide pact if something was to happen to him. And so that was relayed in the documentary. It's quite interesting because I had heard that before with the last two. Didn't know if that was truth or not. But Geronda admits that he said to her if something was to happen to him that he would want her to sign a suicide pact. And she was like, I guess, um, or go along with the suicide pact. And basically, she was stunned that he would even ask. And when you listen to that, you think that's a form of control, someone wanting you to do a suicide pact, because what can they do if they're gone? They don't know that you've done it. But anyway, she's also the young lady who introduced Dominique to Mr. Robert Kelly. She was a friend, and he had asked her if she had any friends, and this is how Dominic Gardner came into Mr. Kelly's life as a friend. Now, naturally, he told her she would ask him had he called her or talked to her, and he would deny that he ever had any contact with Dominic, but all along he had spoken to her. They never were in the house at the same time, so obviously Mr. Kelly didn't let Geronda know that he was talking to um, Dominic or that she was visiting. Dominic's mother claims that it was her dream to meet Robert Kelly, and she felt like once they got together, he wanted to isolate her. Now, mind you, this mother, once she got into the company of Mr. Kelly, she had not seen her child in like 3 years. So imagine one day she and a news production crew make it to LA, find out he's in LA. She goes to the hotel. She uses a ruse to get the daughter to come down uh, to the lobby, but instead she ended up going upstairs because she was telling the front desk that there was a package downstairs for her, but instead she ended up going upstairs. She sees her daughter. You can see the look on her face. She is like majorly shocked that she's there, and of course these camera people are there. Long story short, she leaves out of there, goes back to Chicago, and then 3 days later she goes back with R. Kelly. She states that she was glad to get back to see, Azriel and Jocelyn, and she didn't want to leave Jocelyn because she had a bond with her, and she was like a sister to her. And the crazy thing is, for a minute, she thought it was going to be okay. She thought, Rob was going to treat her well, but then she realized that, the only woman she loved was her mother, and she knew that she could not stay there. And the thing about her situation, I think that baffled me the most during her interview during this documentary is that it, naturally she had more of a boyish look, and I think a lot of people who followed the story of her and R. Kelly, that her original pictures of when she first got with him, she was had long hair, pretty hair, wore makeup. But when the mother got to that hotel that day, she had more of a boyish look, short hair. And we find out in this documentary that Robert had pulled out her hair and it was breaking off, so she ended up getting it cut all off because he advised that I think you look good with short hair. Well, yeah, I guess so, considering it was coming out. And the one of the gentlemen in the uh, for the network asked her, producer asked her, "What is this we hear about him wanting you to be a boy or dress up like a boy, and she refused to answer that question, which I thought was so sad. And I knew there had to have been some truth to that, because that was a rumor that had floated around that R. Kelly wanted her to be more of a boy than a female. But she got away from him, and she's been living her life. And there's been so many women, they kind of like run into each other. Was like one after the other. There was Asante McGee. She didn't like the sexual acts that he would want her to perform, and she felt like he always, would summon sex. It was just like all the time he wanted sex, and to her, she considered that abuse, especially the acts that he wanted her to perform. She didn't like the fetishes that he had. So it was like, as I state, one after the other, or they were simultaneously living together. Um, Geronda admitted, and this is the one who was Mr. Kelly had dated as a child. She's the one you see standing out on the sidewalk at the time when he was going to his initial trial for the sex charges of the video of the young girl back in 2002. Um, when he was brought up on charges for that said case. And you'll see a young lady who was out always rallying, and then, standing out there waiting on Mr. Kelly. Geronda said, although she is married, she still has trouble with sex with her husband. She didn't really want to admit that, but she admitted that. And that, it's hard on her because of the abuse that she sustained with Mr. Kelly, and I guess the sexual acts. And of course, it has been said by many of the women in the installment that he prefers sex with other girls, women in the house, and also other men were brought in, or a guy was brought in as well with the ladies. We have Azriel Clary, who was actually underage, and he met her in Florida. And frankly, I think this is the one that he really should have been prosecuted for, because she was actually underage when he met her. And naturally, she met him, took off, and stayed with him. And it was years. Same thing with her family, no contact. And as you see in the Gayle King interview with her and Jocelyn, they both were agreeing that their parents, all this is orchestrated for money. Azriel had more of an attitude. When you listen to her in that interview with Gayle King for CBS News, and you realize that these young ladies were, in cahoots with what they were saying about him. Now, some people have argued what was truth and what was not about the young ladies, and what transpired with the parents as far as being paid. Naturally, none of the parents have admitted to being paid by Mr. R. Kelly or asking him of said money. But in 2019, Mr. Kelly had got arrested finally for sexual improprieties with minors, and he had got $1 million bond, and he had to post $100,000, which he did not have that said money. A lady posted that bond for him, and of course, you learn later down the road she asked for that money back. Of course, that wasn't mentioned in this documentary about that in this 3 and 4th episode, but I just threw that out there because most of you have already heard that about her wanting the money back. Okay. I think what is just so weird, then of course, there was Jocelyn, who parents were desperately trying to get her out of there. And they probably stayed in the media more than anyone, the most, because of the parents, the Savages, trying to get their child back. And it was sad because she cut off contact with her family. She cut off, wouldn't call, wouldn't have any type of relationship with these people. So in your mind, you're wondering, like, what was really going on that these young ladies would forfeit, at least Azriel and Jocelyn and Miss Garner Those were the three that had severed ties with their family. And then we learned of the other ladies who were also stayed in the home, and that there were times when he did not feed them. They had to get permission to use the restroom. All of that. All of that. That is what they attest in this documentary. That there were times there were no food. There was no food, no water. Had to get permission to use the restroom, phone calls, all of that. And I think what perturbed me the most with the this 3 and 4 episode is Dominic's, her dressing like a boy, looking masculine. The fact that he pulled her hair out, she had beautiful hair, and in her earlier pictures, and just the thought that he'd abused her like that and pulled her hair out. That is a woman's crowning glory, is to have her hair. And to know that someone has pulled your hair out, it is a horrific thing to have happened to you, And it was sad watching her talk. It was sad. Now, Geronda looks like she's doing better. Asante, she's working, has an HVAC company. Looks like she's doing well. But all in all, every case, it's the same. It's the same MO with the controlling of the women, telling them how to look, how to dress, didn't want them to dress attractively, the loose clothing, the head to the floor, no eye contact with the entourage. And naturally, there were people who went along with this, who worked alongside Mr. Kelly. So what you have to ask yourself is, like, what was the end result? Many people will, banter back and forth that everything was about money pertaining to Mr. Kelly. But I always tell people, you always have to remember Mr. Kelly couldn't read or write. So he might be able to read a $10 bill. Maybe he was getting paid cash for his concerts. That would be the same thing to do if you couldn't orchestrate business because you're illiterate. But it was sad. It was just sad listening to the stories, and him spitting on the beautician, the hair braider, that got me. That floored me. That got me. The Dominic Gardner situation, finding out he cut off, he pulled her hair out, so ended up cutting it short. Like, she really didn't have an option. What can you do when your hair is breaking off? I think those two just floored me the most. And I'm not saying the other ladies' situations were not bad, but I'm just, from what was repeated. And then finding out he also dated a Caucasian girl, that was interesting because I had never heard of R. Kelly dating a Caucasian woman. And same MO, always other women, always other fetishes, always inviting other women to participate. And as I stated in my earlier video of the first and second episode, that was his MO even as a young man, was to invite other women to participate in sexual acts with other women. And I got a feeling that some of the women probably didn't like doing it. They went along. And as I state, many will argue, well, if they were grown, they could have left. One ended up leaving. The one that was a DJ. But as I state, women do things for men, with men, when they're not famous. And I'm not making excuses for the women. Because to each its own what people do. But I do believe he was abusive to the women. I believe when Dominic said he pulled her hair out, I believe that. Because each person has made that claim in the documentary, that he was physically abusive, that he could flip at a drop of a hat. And that was obvious in the Gayle King interview. You can see how 1 minute he's talking and then he gets flipped. And a lot of the ladies who gave commentary said, yes, that's how it starts. He starts out, he's cool, he's fine. You do or say something he doesn't like, then boom, this other person emerges. And so, like some guy had said on a YouTube channel that was critiquing his behavior and his demeanor, he said, now imagine if he could go off like that in front of a live news crew, what would he do behind closed doors? And I agree with that. I will bring you another update for the finale that already aired. I'm a little bit behind on the videos, but I'm sure to be the talk of the city. And as I stated to you all, Mr. Kelly is facing numerous counts of sexual improprieties, sexual assault against minors. Um, in the current indictment that he is facing out of Illinois, New York, Minnesota, and also, I believe, Detroit, Michigan. And so we will see how that turns out, him going to court, and what will be the final result. Thanks for joining me, and I will be back with the last installment of The Reckoning. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.